Hello, and welcome to this edition of Hazmats in History. This series is designed to discuss the hazardous materials emergencies of the past that have led us to how we respond today. In this segment, we're going to discuss an incident that occurred over 40 years ago in the small town of Waverly, Tennessee. This town of 4,300 people was rocked when a rail car carrying almost 28,000 gallons of liquefied petroleum gas catastrophically failed 2 days after the initial derailment. Three things: a misunderstanding of the rail car's construction and the damage it had sustained, the lack of scene control brought about by increasing complacency and the lack of command and control, and significant changes in the environment all led to the disaster that occurred on February 24th, 1978. On the evening of Wednesday, February 22nd, a Louisville-Nashville train with 3 locomotives and 92 train cars left Nashville. Headed westerly towards Waverly, some 60 miles away, it stopped once to add 5 more cars to the train. One of those cars, a gondola car, had an improperly applied manual handbrake set. As the train moved, the handbrake caused the high carbon wheel to overheat and eventually crack. This caused the wheel to slide inward on the axle, and for the next 7 miles, this damaged wheel began to significantly compromise the car. Finally, at 10:25 p.m., while traveling 35 miles per hour, 24 cars of the westbound train derailed in the town of Waverly. 2 of the derailed cars in this pileup near the heart of downtown Waverly were 33,000-gallon DOT spec 112A400W tank cars, each carrying approximately 28,000 gallons of liquefied petroleum gas. The tank car numbered A3013 encouraged a gouge and a dent in the metal of the tank. This gouge and dent started near the head of the tank and ran along the lower right side all the way to the middle of the car. Along the way, the gouge damaged the bead of an exterior weld. The gouge, the dent, and the damaged weld in a pressurized container like this can result in a condition that is known as a critical container. This critical container can catastrophically crack and tear, opening violently and releasing its entire contents. But on this evening, that didn't happen. The initial actions taken by the police and fire department were pretty much spot on. The deputy fire chief, along with the conductor of the train, reviewed the contents list and identified the 2 LPG rail cars. Later, firefighters made a visual inspection and determined that there were no apparent LPG leaks or fires. So the area was cordoned off 200 yards in all directions. Water supplies were established and large caliber monitors were put in place in case of need. One initial error was made. It was assumed that the tank car was covered with an outer jacket, so the damage was thought not to involve the actual pressurized container. Still, everything remained stable. The Tennessee Civil Defense Office was notified and a coordinator with a 3-person team arrived at 8:30 in the morning. They verified no leaks with gas detection equipment, but they also recommended that the isolation area be extended to 1/4 mile in all directions and all utilities, including gas and electric, be shut down. The L&N Railroad wrecking crews arrived on Thursday and started to clear the tracks to allow for repairs. During that process, boxcars were removed from tank car 83013 to allow for it to be taken off the tracks. 83013 was then moved by lifting one end of the tank in a pivot maneuver using the opposite end of the tank as the pivot point. This allowed the tank to be moved 12 feet off the tracks. This action may have further stressed the damage near the weld of the tank. But again, nothing happened. Scene control appeared to deteriorate over time. A single focus of authority and decision-making was not readily apparent. The railroad crews continued clearing the tracks, and the tracks were reopened by 8 p.m. Thursday. Businesses began reopening again as the perimeter began to break down. Pressures were brought about, And through whatever chain of command did exist, perimeter and safety recommendations of the volunteer fire department that were ordered were further relaxed. On Friday, the 24th of February at 2:53 p.m., as rail crews and their contractors were planning to offload the LPG to other containers, it all began to fall apart. You see, the derailment occurred 2 days earlier on a breezy evening with temperatures in the mid-20s. This resulted in an internal tank pressure of about 45 pounds per square inch. However, over the following days it warmed up, and on Friday the 24th, on a day that then 25-year-old Waverly police officer Buddy Frazier, who by the way today is the mayor of Waverly, described to me a day that was like a short-sleeve shirt kind of day. Now the temperature was 50 degrees and the sun was shining. These conditions and the actions taken prior all came together at 2:53 p.m. With the higher ambient temperature, the pressure inside the tank began to approach 80 pounds. That gouge across that well just could not withstand that pressure. The damage from the derailment, the subsequent movement of the tank, and the increased pressure caused by the temperature change came together to cause that gouge and that crack across the well to give way. People nearby reported seeing a vapor cloud develop around the front of the tank. Then, faster than many were able to escape, it happened. The crack in that weld turned into a tear which ran the length of the gouge, and the tank split apart into 4 massive pieces. The entire contents of 28,000 gallons of LPG expanded 270 times. 5 to 7 seconds later, it found an ignition source, creating an unconfined vapor explosion and a massive 1,700-degree fireball. 16 people died, including the police and fire chief. Some were incinerated in their cars, while others died days or weeks later from burns they sustained. 40 others were severely burned, and Waverly and its residents were changed forever. For those of us in the hazardous materials emergency response community, there are 3 major take-home messages about the Waverly disaster. First, always establish and maintain a strong incident command system with a single or unified commander. Stand your ground with regards to safety decisions and control zones. They tried to do that in Waverly, but somehow it got overrode. Second, a container damage assessment needs to be done by qualified individuals prior to any movement, particularly in the cases of liquefied compressed gases. Whether they are bulk, non-bulk, rail, highway, or portable, pressurized containers with dents, gouges that reduce the metal thickness, and damaged welds all need to be suspect. If these containers are deemed to be critical, then the most important consideration should be to safely reduce internal pressures. This may involve control flaring of the product's vapors. Third, always evaluate the impacts of the environment on your product. Increases in temperature results in increases in pressure. Research your product thoroughly. Know your containers and monitor the environment. Through your knowledge of hazardous materials and your ability to conduct a proper hazard analysis and risk assessment, you can prevent situations like what occurred in Waverly from ever happening again. Let's learn from the lessons of the past and change how we do things today. Until the next Hazmat in history, stay safe.